welcome to this primary election debate for Republican candidates for Maricopa County Recorder. This debate is sponsored by Clean Elections, the state's nonpartisan voter education agency. My name is Richard Rellis, and I'll be moderating today's debate. The format will probably be familiar to you, but the way we're sharing this debate is part of a brand new effort to support democracy in Arizona. Thanks to a partnership with the Clean Elections Commission and the Arizona Media Association, we're making sure these 2024 debates are the most accessible in Arizona history. That means this debate will air on a long list of local TV stations, radio stations, and digital platforms, including support from local newspapers. It's a shared effort among hundreds of local media brands across Arizona. Transparency is critical here. That's why these conversations have been designed with input from a broad group of journalists in Arizona representing both urban and rural communities. And we've tried to keep the rules simple. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement and 1 minute for a closing statement. Candidates have drawn straws to determine that order. Throughout the debate, I'll pose questions to each candidate, allow them to answer, and then make sure other candidates have a chance to respond. Whenever a question is directed at a specific candidate, only that candidate's microphone will be open, but at all other times, every microphone will be open. Thank you to the voters across Arizona who have submitted questions for this debate. We've reviewed all of them to make sure every voice is heard. However, no candidates have been given advanced access to any of the questions. Before we begin, let's briefly explain the role of the county recorder. The recorder's office is responsible for maintaining voter files for the more than 2.6 million active registered voters in Maricopa County. The office partners with Maricopa County Elections Department to plan and hold county, state, and federal level elections for all eligible voters. And the office also processes and preserves more than 1 million property records annually. And if the election stuff gets boring, I have a sheath of questions about property records prepared. With that, let's introduce our candidates. Justin Heap, Donald Hiatt, and Stephen Richer. And Stephen Richer, the drawing of the straws says you have the first opening statement. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you, Richard. My name is Stephen Richer. I am the Maricopa County Recorder. As Richard mentioned, my office is responsible for the recording of public documents, for voter registration and list maintenance, and for mail voting, the mail voting component of election administration in Maricopa County. My office is an office of about 150 full-time employees. For that reason, this should not be a person's first management job. It would be my two opponents' first management job. It was not my first management job when I took office in January of 2021. As a result, we've been able to get a lot of things done. We have cleaned the voter rolls. Richard mentioned 2.6 million active registered voters. But that statistic is actually from 2021 when I took office. We are now at 2.4 million registered active voters in Maricopa County. We've gone down by 200,000 despite being the fastest growing county in the United States. So anyone who talks about voter rolls has to establish that it has been done to the tune of 200,000 over the last 2 years. We've also done things like Maricopa Title Alert to prevent against title fraud. We've done things like enhanced ballot tracking. We've done things like rebuild our website. And another hallmark of my office is that we follow the law. Many cases have been filed over the last 3.5 years. My office has lost 0 cases, 0, because we follow the law. And it's for these reasons that I've been endorsed by the likes of Governor Jan Brewer, Governor Doug Ducey. Every single professional organization that has endorsed in this race has endorsed my candidacy. Fire, police, realtors, chambers of commerce, as well as every elections official, including the longest-serving Maricopa County Recorder in Maricopa County history, Helen Purcell. That is why I'm running for re-election. Thank you.
Thank you, Recorder Richard. Donald Hiatt, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Don Hiatt, and by trade, I am not a politician. Our founding fathers envisioned that our country would be, our government would be run by the people, of the people, and for the people. They did not, however, envision a career politician who would use the government to enrich themselves. I am not looking at the recorder's race as a stepping stone to my next political ambition. I have a lifelong career of working with data integrity. I bring that skill to help work for the recorder's office. I'm looking forward to using my skills in that space. Unlike myself or both of my opponents, Mr. Richer has a propensity for not wanting to follow the law when it comes to the Ten Commandments or the Constitution. He does not believe the First Amendment should be used. He believes it needs to be amended or changed. He also has spent a lot of time on social media in canceling people and asking for their tweets or their posts to be removed, including removing their accounts from social media. So he comes to this race with, there was a recent document that was sent to him, a cease and desist, where he was blocking people in Twitter, and he admitted guilt, and he immediately unblocked 30 accounts after that event occurred. So I think that there's some issues that we have to look at as the integrity of the person who is going to be in this office.
Thank you. And the final opening statement, Justin Heap, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Justin Heap. I'm running for Maricopa County Recorder. My family loves Arizona. For 6 generations, my family has poured our blood, sweat, and tears into clawing a life from the high deserts of Arizona. For the past 170 years, we have worked to create our own American dream right here in Arizona. And we have toiled to help make it a place of opportunity for our neighbors and for our fellow Arizonans. I'm running for this office because Maricopa County's elections have made us a national laughingstock. The 2022 election, from half the voting centers going down on the day of to a 3-week delay before we knew who had won the election, it has become clear that ensuring the right of every citizen to have confidence in their vote, regardless of party, has become the civil rights issue of our time. Unfortunately, our current county recorder has taken a different path, a path that disrespects and demeans the voters, a path that attacks anyone who criticizes his office and laughs off even the suggestion that there might be anything wrong with our election system. If I am elected county recorder, I will work tirelessly every minute of every day to ensure that we reestablish confidence in our election system, to show the voters in an open and transparent way that all Arizona election laws are being followed, that the voters are being respected and their concerns are addressed, and that everyone can have confidence once again in their right as a citizen to vote. We can fix this system. I hope that you will support me.
Thank you. And now on to questions. Mr. Hiatt, we'll start with you. You spent time at the tabulation center and done some tours with Recorder Richer. What did you see there? Did anything that you saw concern you or sort of make your belief in the election system greater?
When it comes to technology, you can't determine what's going on. You can follow the trace of the wires around the room, and if you were allowed into the room, you might be able to conclude, yeah, they don't go anywhere. But just standing there looking at it and the statement made, it can't be verified. So when I was also there, I did go to Runback as the Republican observer to watch those operations. And the evening started at MTech. Ballots started arriving. A car arrived with a ballot box. And then they started sorting out the envelopes, getting them all aligned, putting them into trays. Took them over to Runback. And then Runback has a large machine called a remittance processor that they use to count those ballots and sort them into different categories. Sometimes they'll have, an odd one was that somebody had picked up a green envelope from 2012, and that couldn't be used in this election. So that had to be outsorted. So the whole process was getting the ballots sorted into trays, then they were put into a safe at Runback under camera control, but you, as a citizen, can't see that safe. So I can't tell you what happened after I left. Those are the kinds of problems that I think still need to be vetted out and clarified to make sense out of it.
Mr. Heap, same question. Have you visited the tabulation centers or any of the run-back areas? If not, why not? And if so, what did you see?
I have, and I have a lot of supporters that have gone down and taken the tour to Runbeck. I know I watched the one that they live cast to see the system. The issue with going down to Runbeck or to MedTech or anything, I often tell people, look, I've been to Disneyland a dozen times. I have no idea how Disneyland works. I think that our current recorder thinks that it's enough transparency to simply take tours through the facility to see the rooms and to see where the votes are counted. I don't think that is the real kind of transparency that Arizonans demand in their election system once those ballots are actually there being calculated.
Mr. Richer, you've led those tours. You've also parlayed with people on X, on Twitter, which you say is trying to increase transparency. Does that work, and is that the most efficient way to increase voter confidence in our system?
Well, I appreciate Don talking about the process, and he has visited. It's important to point out that Don has taken a tour, and he has worked as a Republican Party observer. Justin has not. So I don't know where he's getting that from, but Don has come in. And I will point out that that tour is available to anyone who wants to come. You can be a political party as well, observer as well. Even if you are my political opponent, you can come to this office and get an entire tour. I would also say that it's a bit telling that my two opponents can't even get the name of the facility right. It's not MTech, it's MICTech. And that goes to a broader point that this is a confusing office. And Mr. Heap, in his opening statement, said something about voting centers and equipment going down. But as I said at the outset, my office is not responsible for in-person voting. If you want to have a role in in-person voting, then you should run for the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. If you do not appreciate the distinction, then you have not done your homework. As for our means for transparency, I would say that we are competitive with any jurisdiction in the United States. We do teletown halls. We do live video streams. We do tours. We do articles. We do reports. We do videos. So I don't know what else could be done. I'd be up for suggestions, but it's a little rich to throw stones when some of those people have never gone on tours before, but they've gone on tours over the last few years.
Thank you, Mr. Heap. Next, there was an op-ed in The Republic announcing a new group called Right Count, written by former Arizona Governor Jan Brewer. And she said, quote, complaining about the rules every time we come up short is not a recipe for advancing a conservative agenda. She wrote about measures already in place to ensure elections were secure, talked about baseless conspiracy theories that were out there, and said we need to hold to account, quote, those who seek to sow discord and division for political gain. She didn't mention any names, but obviously she's talking about somebody there. Do you see yourself targeted in those comments? Are you looking to sow discord for political gain?
No, I don't see myself targeted in that, but it does, I think, highlight a problem that we currently have in Arizona, which is why do the voters not trust the system? And the problem that we hear from election officials like Mr. Richer and from others is that all of the lack of confidence that voters feel comes from sources outside of the actual elections offices, the people that run the elections. They refer to candidates or to political parties. They talk about social media influencers or the media spreading false information. But I have spoken with thousands of Republicans across Arizona and across Maricopa County. And in fact, I've had two now forum debates with Mr. Richer, and in both of those cases, I was able to ask him a simple question. He insists that he is doing a good job of cleaning and maintaining our voter rolls. So in both of those cases, I asked the audience, how many of you, raise your hand if you or someone you know received an extra ballot in the mail in the last election cycle? And in both those cases, almost half the hands in the room go up. And you can do that with any group of voters anywhere in Maricopa County. The reason why people do not trust the system is how poorly our elections officials run the elections. It's not because they believe misinformation on social media. It's because they see the same problems happening election cycle after election cycle after election cycle, and they cannot get their elected officials to even acknowledge that this is a massive problem and to address their concerns. That is why people do not trust our election system. It is because of the maladministration and poor job that our elections officials have done, both in running the elections. When we had a 3-week delay before we know the answer, that is on Stephen Richer's office. And when he mocks those who ask legitimate questions like, why did I receive additional ballots at my house, and dismisses those claims, that only does more to make the voters more confident that they should not trust this system.
Thank you. We'll come back to that additional ballot question because that is intriguing. Mr. Hiatt, do you feel yourself targeted in Governor Brewer's comments about, are there people out there looking to sow discord for political gain?
Oh, I'm sure there are some people, but I'm not one of them. I'm not a politician, so I'm not sure even I would even know how to do that. But I will tell you that the people out there do know that there is something wrong. Last Saturday, Mr. Richer was laughed off, or actually booed off of the stage, when he was asked if the 2020 election was stolen, and he said no. The entire audience booed until he left, because that's what the people experience. They experience elections that are disasters. They don't really understand that maybe Mr. Richer is only responsible for early voting or not, but they blame the system and including the recorder for this. So the problems that occur are very visible and very, very real to people. And they're not going to go away until we can start showing that we have elections that work, that people don't have problems. They don't end up standing there for hours waiting for things to happen. So that's my comment on it.
And we'll come back to the stolen thing too. A different question for you, Mr. Richer. After the 2018 election, the Arizona Republican Party hired an outside consultant to look at how county elections were run. It's a 28-page report with 200 pages of attachments that I'll try to summarize in 10 seconds. It said that the recorder at the time, Adrian Fontes, improperly publicized emergency voting centers, and that he changed procedures regarding signature verification. It had some unverified theories about coordination with Democratic candidates and officials, and that at least one voter received a ballot at a polling place that was already filled out. That audit was authored by you, Mr. Richer. Do you see a distinction between the questions you raised in that audit and the questions you're facing now as a sitting recorder?
Absolutely. There's nothing in there about a stolen election. There are very specific statutory allegations which were found to be true. And we won court cases. And that is a distinction. Again, we have never lost a court case. If you have a problem with how we are administering the elections, if you don't think we're complying with the law, then sue. But we have won every single court case because we follow the law. And so, yes, I do. And I would say that just the professionalism of that report versus some of the reports that have come out since the 2020 election is markedly different. But I would go back to some of the points made previously. I would say, again, anecdotes are nice, but if you are saying that I do not clean the voter rolls, then you have to explain how we've gone from 2.6 million registered voters to 2.4 million registered voters, despite being the fastest growing county in the United States. The other thing I would point out is, regarding that Saturday event, it was my last question, so that's why I answered it and then left. I was booed because I truthfully answered, was the 2020 election stolen? I said no. But my ability to do that should hopefully give confidence to voters. Now, these two have yet to answer that plainly. They can't tell you yes or no. They might hem and haw, but they cannot even answer the most simple question as to whether or not the 2020 election was stolen from President Trump. And if you can't answer that, then you either haven't done your homework for this office or you lack the courage to be in this office.
Mr. Heap, and I guess we'll follow up on that last point. During your introductory news conference, you were asked if you thought the 2020 or 2022 elections were stolen, and you said as an attorney you only can make statements you can prove. Just to be clear, I'm asking you, Justin Heap, only you know what's in your heart and mind as an individual. Do you believe either election was stolen?
Well, I'm going to give the same answer that I did. As Mr. Richer said, we've had cases go. We've had a lot of cases thrown out. We've never actually had a case that actually got to an evidentiary phase. We've never had a trial. We've never had a full examination of the evidence. As a civil liberties attorney, I don't make statements that I can't prove. But what I can say is two things: that there were inconsistencies and illegalities that were happened. I do not believe laws were followed. We had an almost complete breakdown in our chain of custody. We do have unsecured voter rolls. Stephen can continue to claim that he's done it, but I have talked to thousands of Arizonans who received additional ballots in the mail. I received an additional ballot at my house in someone else's name who has never lived at my house. And so that, for me, is a legitimate cause for concern and a reason to believe that the system is not being run in the way that it needs to be run. But the bigger issue than the potential for fraud or maladministration really is that the voters have lost confidence in the system. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what I might think about the system if a substantial portion of our voters no longer trust that their ballots are being taken care of, that their voices are being heard. That alone is enough for our elected officials to treat them with enough respect to show them that we are fixing the system, to make changes, to reform our system in a way that restores confidence and transparency. We have all the tools to do that under Arizona law. We are simply not doing them with our current county
This being
recorder's office.
a debate, not an interview, we'll take that answer as that. And before I get to you, just a brief follow-up. Do you need to keep the answer about whether the election was stolen opaque to gain votes of moderate Republicans?
No, I give you exactly the same reason that I gave, that I'm not going to make statements that we have not been given enough evidence. There's not enough transparency in our office for us to make a definitive statement. I can say that I think the election rules were not followed and that citizens are right to be skeptical and to doubt that system. I agree with them.
Mr. Hiatt, was either the 20 or 22 election stolen?
Yes, and I'll explain how. And this is how people see it. Mark Zuckerberg dropped in illegal drop boxes. There was $2 million that was given to the elections, Arizona elections, by the Zuckerbucks group as well. There was questionable chain of custody, as Justin mentioned. There was questionable ballots that people looked at. There was all kinds of changes on the data, on reporting of the system. And that's what people see when they look at an election. And whether it's proved in court or not, they look at that and say our election was stolen because of all of those steps that were put in place around it. That's what stole the election.
Mr. Richer, there's no, unless they boo you, was the election in 20 or 2022
No,
stolen?
the election was not stolen, but we need to go back to a few comments that were made. Whether or not the courts ruled, I'm sorry, but the courts are where we go to evaluate fact and to evaluate law. And Justin is either not done his homework or he's lying in saying that we haven't had trials. Following the 2022 election, I appeared as a witness in not one, not two, but 3 election trials where we had a trial with evidentiary hearings in front of a judge. That's the same of the 2020 election. Now, I appreciate that Don at least has the courage to say yes. But Justin stood here again, and he hemmed and hawed. He didn't give you a yes or no, and I would suggest that that is what is damaging to confidence to voters in Arizona. He also made some vague allegations that the law wasn't followed, but yet can't explain why officer of the law can't explain why 0 court cases ruled in favor of a stolen election. And yes, there were evidentiary hearings, and there were over 60 court cases following the 2020 election. So no, the election in 2020 was not stolen from Donald Trump.
We'll stay briefly on this. Why do you think the court challenges have not been successful in either cycle?
Well, I think one thing that we don't like to talk about is that the reality is that our courts are not very well adapted for handling election challenges. By definition, they are slow, deliberative processes that require all evidence to be provided in advance so that both parties have plenty of time to review all the evidence in order to make their case. In an election challenge, this whole process is greatly sped up. and there is not a full opportunity to get full disclosure on a lot of different pieces of documents. And so almost all of these cases have been dismissed on initial grounds, on grounds like things like standing, mootness, latches, on technical grounds, before we've ever actually had a full hearing where all disclosure was made from all sides. Now, there's various reasons for that, but really what it highlights is not an attack on the courts, but how important it is that you have an election official who is going to run an effective system up front and show that the laws are being followed so that there's not a reason for these constant election challenges.
Mr. Hiatt, why do you think the challenges have not been successful?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with judges being afraid of taking election cases. There's been several that I've looked at, and all across the country, there seems to be a lawfare attack on judges and people, lawyers, that are participating in election challenges. And that's a fact. So why is that the case? Why is the other side, the left side, attacking the election process when somebody questions it? When they themselves questioned the elections in 2016, they said, oh, these were not fair elections. There were problems with it. And that Donald Trump was not their president. He wasn't a president. So a lot of this is vitriol, and a lot of it is fear. And I don't believe that the judges are acting clearly on those cases.
And the same question to you. Why
So
have the challenges
I'll point
not?
out that why are the judges ruling that way? Because that's what the fact and the laws militate. I don't think that our courts are ill-equipped or that our judges are scared. I think they followed the law. I think they followed the facts. And I would point out the fact that Justin went pretty quickly from there were no cases with evidentiary hearings to most of the cases were dismissed on other grounds. Not even that is true. We had multiple trials in 2020, multiple trials following the 2022 election, including one in the spring of 2023. So yes, the litigants had plenty of time to gather whatever necessary evidence in order to make their case, but their case is lost. And so while election litigation is an important part of the process, and I welcome anyone filing election litigation, once you have lost, it's important for us to acknowledge it. And again, I would say to the extent that you have to hem and haw or say why the courts can't handle it or why the courts are afraid or maybe why the courts are liars or maybe why they're controlled by Soros, that is what is undermining confidence in the election process. If everyone just said, you know what, the courts looked at the facts and they looked at the law and this is how they ruled, then we would be in a much better place than we are today.
Back to the multiple ballot thing. You say at events people raise their hands and you received multiple ballots yourself. What would happen if a voter returned more than one ballot? Do you think, because this would be something that the recorder's office would handle, do you think there are adequate safeguards in place that would ensure only one vote is cast, or what would you institute to ensure that, if not?
No, I don't feel that there are, or at least those safeguards are not being followed. We have a serious problem with simply having unmaintained voter rolls. And we have tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of people who are still on our voter rolls who automatically receive a ballot through our early balloting system, who have either moved, have died, have changed addresses, were misregistered in the first place, and these ballots are being sent out. Once these ballots are received, if they are still a legitimate ballot, whether they should have been sent one or not, then realistically the only security we have on that ballot is the signature verification that we check, where we are supposed to have an open, transparent system where those ballots are checked. By as best we can tell in the legislature, and we have been working for 2 years, filing FOIA requests and attempting to get documents on this, and as well as the courts have looked at it, it does not appear that we are doing an effective job of first double checking when someone is registered to vote, whether they should be on there. If, for example, you have someone registered at a business, I know I met with someone yesterday who received a form allowing them to register to vote that was listed to resident at their business. Had that person filled out that thing and signed and sent it in, I don't believe that there are safeguards that this would have been caught at the recorder's office. We are not doing adequate signature verification as we are required by law. You can see that both in online videos that you can see on YouTube right now of approving almost every ballot. I do not trust the system as it is currently being operated. We are sending out too many ballots. We are not following any of the safeguards to make sure that these ballots are not being counted or caught.
Mr. Hiatt, could someone potentially vote twice if they receive 2 ballots?
If the system were to see their voter ID twice, one of the ballots, usually the second ballot, would be invalidated, but that's not a guarantee. I've spoken to a person who has been told he voted, and he did not. And he's chased this down through the recorder's office now for about 2 years. And every time an election comes up, somebody else seems to vote for him before he gets there. So there's problems with the voter rolls, definitely. There's 11,000 ballots that were sent to, 3 ballots each sent to 11,000 addresses for the exact same voter ID, name, last name, social security number. So when somebody says, oh, we cleaned up the voter rolls and these kinds of things show up, this showed up in the latest, one of the latest early voting data files. And that just simply says the voter rolls are not clean.
Mr. Richer, why are people sometimes receiving more than 1 ballot, and what happens if someone does return?
So that didn't show up in the most recent data files, and I'm sorry that you don't understand the data files, but I will point out the effectiveness of the TORs. Don knows that on early ballot return affidavit envelopes, there's a barcode that links to the voter's profile. That meaning that even if that voter, for some reason, got 2 mail ballot packets, one of those would be automatically deactivated the second that one went out. Justin didn't know that, so the TORs are working. That's how we prevent somebody from voting twice, in addition to signature verification. To anyone who says that somebody's voting twice, I would say, show me. Show me. The reality is, those people haven't come forward. Again, Justin references the courts. He references the state legislature. Signature verification has been upheld in the courts time after time, including with evidentiary hearings. And then I would also say that regarding signature verification, it is a process that I have materially improved, adding additional audit cues to the process. And so that is an important last check, but it is by no means the only check. Regarding dead voters, Mark Brnovich's office as Attorney General spent 10,000 man-hours looking for, quote, dead voters. Out of over 2 million votes cast in the 2020 election, they found 1. They found 1. So these allegations are nice, and sometimes they sound good on the internet, and sometimes they sound good here, but I deal with facts and I deal with law, and the courts have held time and time again that we have done it right, and that's why we have never lost. But I do appreciate Don pointing out the importance of that barcode.
We'll start with you this time, Mr. Hiatt. Do you think that this issue of election integrity would be as strong if Donald Trump were working out of the White House and Kari Lake were working out of the governor's office?
No, I don't. And the reason I say that is because before Donald Trump, well, actually, when he first took office, the Democrats were claiming that there was election fraud all over the place. So there's one of the problems is this. You cannot see when somebody stuffs the ballot box today. When you used to go to a polling location and you could see the ballot box and you could put your ballot in and you could have poll observers see other people put their ballots in, they could tell if somebody was stuffing the ballot box. But right now, you cannot see that because we have millions of green, no excuse mail-in ballots coming in for who knows who on a lot of those registrations. In fact, I just received a registration last week from someone who bought a house in 1987. They've lived in the house since. It was a model home when they bought it. They are the only people that have ever lived or owned that house. And they just received a registration for someone at their address who did not provide adequate citizenship documentation. So they were told, you'll be able to vote in the presidential elections. That was last week.
Mr. Heap, is this issue a results-based? If Trump or Lake had been in their respective offices, would we be having this conversation with as much energy?
Well, I imagine we might have it from the other side. I have to address, though, what the game that Stephen appears to be playing here, which is to take statements that we make, slightly change the meaning of what is said, and then imply that there's some sort of lie occurring here. What I said was that the courts had never had a trial. We've never had an actual full trial. Not that no evidentiary hearing in any case had ever been held. That's a very different thing. We've never had full disclosure. Then when I said, I received an extra ballot at my house in someone else's name, not my name, the name of someone else who never lived at my home. I didn't say that if one person sent 2 ballots with their name in it, that wouldn't be caught. What happens to the hundreds of people that I have just met with who have said, I received ballots for other people that I don't know that have not lived in my house? Can we be sure that that some of those people aren't simply filling out those ballots, scribbling a signature and sending it in, and that is being caught? I don't think that we can. I don't think that we have the safeguards or the systems in place. But I go back again to it's the problems in our election system. It's the way our elected officials poorly run our elections and then dismiss and disrespect the voters that leads voters to have a lack of confidence. It's not the results. If the office was transparent and everyone could see that the law was being followed, we would be fine with whoever won. The citizens just want to know who won, and that the winner won legitimately, and that all the ballots were fairly canceled. And they are not getting that from their elected officials when they ask any reasonable question about our election system.
There's a couple things to address there. The wonky question about what happens if someone gets a ballot at their address under 2 names. Does the system stop that? But also, do you see this as being results-based, that if Trump and Lake had won, we wouldn't be having this conversation at this level?
At this level, absolutely. I think that a lot of this has been from the fallout of the 2020 election and from the 2022 election, because people have very prominently been unwilling to accept the results of those elections, and that's unfortunate. As for transparency, I would point out that you can ask me questions online. You can get an email to my office. We'll respond within 24 hours. You can call in. We've reduced the call wait times. And I would point out again that my political opponent, Don Hiatt, has been in the facility twice over the last few months, spent all of election night during the March presidential preference election in my facility, has taken a tour of that facility. Again, I don't know what more we can do as far as transparency. I hear a lot of criticism. I don't hear a lot of ideas. I hear a lot of talk about, well, we should be doing elections differently, but I don't hear a lot of ideas that are consistent with state law. And again, just going back, it's now become a full evidentiary hearing. Well, we have had full evidentiary hearings. In the case for Lake versus Hobbs,
I said
we had
trial.
a full evidentiary hearing and a full trial as well. It was a judge trial. It was not a jury trial, but it was still a judge trial that we had. And so I don't know what to say other than, I guess you don't believe the courts, and I guess we'll denigrate that institution next.
Mr. Heap, if we were to roll back no excuse early voting and go back to one-day paper ballot as President Trump has advocated, do you think there are voters who might still be allowed to cast a ballot by mail?
Well, whether or not how we modify the system and whether we're going to have early ballots and what restrictions, that's really going to be a question between the legislature and the governor on how we're going to do it. As it stands right now, Arizona law allows for early ballots. So I think it is the case that the closer we can get to Election Day balloting, the safer our system is going to be. And this is not simply coming from me. Even Jimmy Carter, the Democratic former president, wrote a lengthy book. He wrote the book on the problems with automatic early voting, how insecure the system is. Clearly, day of voting is the best. I have personally pushed and advocated for Maricopa County to go back to the precinct voting model to make it as easy as possible for people who want to vote in vote day of to be able to vote. But for those of us that vote by early mail, or the voters who like it, we need to lock the system down and make it as secure as possible, because it is the least secure method of voting, but to vote by early ballot.
But even in that legislation, would it have exempted anybody? Who would have still been allowed to vote by mail?
Well, there's been numerous pieces of legislation. So I know there's been proposals to say that senior citizens or anybody with a reason, people who are a certain distance away from a voting center, anyone who doesn't have a reason why. The most recent attempt was to simply amend the rules to say you have to request an early ballot before each election cycle. So before the election, we send out a notice to the voters. Those that would like an early ballot can sign and continue to vote by mail. But that would end our early voting, our automatic early voting system, where if someone requests one, we will just keep mailing out ballots to that same address for the next 4 election cycles.
Thank you. Same question. You've talked about precinct. What do you think about early voting? Who should be allowed to early vote?
Well, there's always been excused voting or excuses. The people would go get an early ballot because they had an excuse. A doctor who has to be at the hospital on surgery that day, the UACAVA voters, people who are elderly and can't get to the voting locations. That's always been there. Where the problem is the no excuse mail-in green ballot. Those are the most insecure ballots that we can have. You don't show up and show your face with a piece of ID to say that I'm the person who filled this out and I'm putting it in the box. I mean, I would be a lot less opposed to mail out ballots as long as you had to bring it in with a photo ID to turn it in.
Okay.
Because then we would be able to verify who it is. Right now, we've heard about NGOs out there that are gathering up ballots, the 2001 Mules movie, and they're voting with these approaches.
Mr. Richer, your thoughts? Does the
just real
early
quickly,
voting system need to be tightened up?
I would point out that the 2000 Mules movie has even been taken out of theaters, and the book has been taken off the shelf because the publisher acknowledges that it made many false statements. And so I wouldn't put much stock on that. Arizona has had no excuse vote by mail since 1992. In the mid-2000s, Arizona created what was then called the Permanent Early Voting List. We've gotten good at this system. I think that we're one of the best states in the United States. We weren't one of the states when in 2020, when the pandemic hit, who all of a sudden had to figure out vote by mail. We've long had over 70% of our ballot returns come through no excuse vote by mail. Now, we will follow the state law, and the state law is written by the state legislature and signed by the governor. So if they were to change that, which I don't think they're going to, but if they were to change that, we would of course follow it. Now, I would point out that if it's only election day, then the recorder has no election responsibilities because the Board of Supervisors runs in-person voting on election day.
Mr. Heap, there's been a lot of talk about the problems with election integrity and the problems with the office. A lot of the blame is being put at the feet of the current occupant. But do you think there's a deep state of some sort in the recorder's office? Are there longtime staffers who go back to the Helen Purcell era? Would you do some sort of vetting of long-term employees if you took office?
Well, it seems that certainly in the last 2 election cycles, the voters have lost confidence in the system. And it is the case that most of the employees who are in that office are the same people who were there in 2020, who have been there who were there prior, who were hired under a radical Democrat, Adrian Fontes, and those are the majority of them, or they've been there since Helen Purcell, which means they have been there for 10 to 15 election cycles. They are career bureaucrats. We need to do a review of everyone who is in that office, and we need to change the internal policy. We need to step in and basically do a performance review on the actual employees. We need to put forward a plan that says this is what Arizona law requires. This is how we are going to show the people that we are following Arizona law, and here is how we are going to correct the system to address what the voters are demanding of us. So, yes.
Mr. Hiatt, same question. Do you think that you need to root out the longtime employees who have been there?
Well, I think you would have to look at that, but I don't think that's really the core problem. I think that there's a lot of other areas where the issues lie, and I'll keep pointing back to the mail-in ballot. You can't prove that an envelope that came through the mailbox was actually put there by the person who's written on the outside of the envelope. There's supposedly a signature verification, and I say supposedly because we've all seen the issues with that. Somebody sitting there clicking and accepting every signature at 1.6 seconds each. I've been trained on the 38-step Secretary of State signature verification process. I've done, I think it was 20,000 signature verifications. My average rate was 20 seconds per each signature, because you're looking at signatures that come off of pin little tablets, kinds of things that make it very difficult to look for any kind of finesse in the signatures. So I don't think that the signature is adequate enough where there are not a lot of voters, a lot of votes that are being stuffed into the ballot box. I'm sorry.
Mr. Richer, when you took office, what did you see as far as the longtime staffers who were there?
So people don't seem to know my office, and that's okay. It's my office. But when I won election in November 2020, I had over 60 one-on-one Zoom calls with personnel in the office before I even set foot in the office. I categorically reject any insinuation that the people in the office today are anything but hardworking and ethical. Now, as for the duration of some of their time in the office, my chief of staff joined in 2021. My chief deputy joined in 2021. My director of voter registration joined in 2021. My director of technology joined in May of 2021. My director of recording services joined in 2022. So I don't really know who these long-term employees or people installed by the nefarious leftist Adrian Fontes really are. And I would also point out that all of these processes are bipartisan processes that can be watched by political party observers and can be watched on our video streams. So important to note that I think we'll continue to look at personnel as any responsible office does. And again, I've run offices before. I've been a manager. I've been in charge of large number of people. That's not true of these two.
I'm going to have to take exception to that and rebut that, please.
We'll have to move on to another personnel question. There was recently a theft of a security...
I need to rebut that.
Yes, very quickly.
Okay, Mr. Richer keeps saying that I don't have any management experience.
And what is your management experience?
I've started 2 startup companies that went from 1 and 2 people to 300 people. I've managed staffs of as large as 75 and quite frequently 45 and 60 people. So I'm going to settle that right now.
Point made.
That I
Recently, there was
experience.
a theft of a security fob and keys from the election center, not your department, run by the Board of Supervisors, but still, the recorder's office hires temporary workers too. Obviously, the security fob and keys were recovered, but what security measures have you implemented to prevent such thefts and vetting of any temporary employees that the recorder's office hires?
So we do not vet for political background. We think that's very important. We welcome people who have different political backgrounds. In fact, it's a necessary ingredient in the process, such that Republicans are watching Democrats. I am proud that we have achieved a level of bipartisanship never before seen in our temporary worker recruitment program. Now, regarding security, we built a fence surrounding the MCTEC facility. We installed additional cameras. We put security personnel inside the building. We did more with badge access. We did more with port blockers. We did more with exposed wiring. We put things in Faraday cages. I didn't even know what Faraday cages were until I took this office. And I would point out in the board's defense that the system worked exactly as it should have. The person was apprehended immediately. He did not have any political motive. He is now in the hands of the authorities, and he did not change or alter any system. But nonetheless, the board is going back, resetting things just to be extra cautious.
To security, Mr. Heap, election workers, poll worker volunteers report feeling threatened. What steps would you take to ensure their safety?
Well, obviously I condemn any sort of violence or threats against any elected officials. That's simply not part of who we are as Americans, and I would categorically reject that. I also condemn what seems to be the Democrats' use of the abuse of government to go after and to weaponize our justice system, our legal system, to attack political officials that they don't seem to approve of. I see both of these as an attack on our institution as Americans. If anyone makes a threat against a public official, I believe they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Mr. Hiatt, steps to ensure the safety of election workers and poll workers?
Well, I think training is one aspect of it. I think there's a fear-mongering aspect that's been pushed into it. That, yes, there have been people that have been threatened, and that's going to scare everybody. But it's not, I don't believe it's as big of an issue as it is. And the security procedures that are in place around the Maricopa County Technical Center seem to be quite adequate. And I think at this point that's good enough.
Good enough? Is there more that needs to be done?
There's more that needs to be done. We're so grateful for the police departments. We're so grateful for the county sheriff's office. But what needs to be done comes from leaders. Leaders need to say the truth about our election system. Leaders need to condemn when people take it into their hands to do crazy things or say crazy things. And unfortunately, there hasn't been enough of that. There haven't been enough people saying, no, these people didn't steal the 2020 election. No, these people didn't steal the 2022 election. And when you go on television and you lie to a large number of followers about what happened in those elections, then it's no surprise that 1 out of every 3 election workers in the United States of America has received a threat. That's not good for the future of election administration. That's not good for the recorder's office, no matter who's at the helm.
And we are nearing the end. We didn't get to any document recording questions. Maybe you can handle it in your closing statements, but it is time now for closing statements. And the first, we'll have 1 minute for each of you, and we'll keep you on time by politely cutting you off, or impolitely, depending on how I feel if you run over. Stephen Richer, you have the first closing statement.
Well, since we didn't hit document recording, I'll just point out 2 things that are emblematic of my time over the past 3.5 years. We created Maricopa Title Alert, a system that did not exist previously, a system that allows users to prevent against deed fraud. We relaunched the kiosk remote recording system, and we're in the process of launching a new recording website that will allow you to search more of the indexed 55 million documents. Again, this is emblematic of my time in office. I hit the ground running, I can get things done. That's why I've been endorsed by conservative executives like Doug Ducey, like Jan Brewer. That's why I've been endorsed by every single election administrator who has endorsed in this race, including longtime former recorder Helen Purcell. I'm going to get things done in 2025, in 2026, 2027, and 2028, God willing, with your help. Thank you.
Our next closing statement goes to you, Donald Hiatt.
Thank you. I'm going to tell you a little story about 70 ballots that arrived in the 2020 election. And every one of those 70 ballots were for Biden. And the funny thing is, they were all mail-in ballots. So there should be some randomness. You should have some intersprinkling of other ballots, but they weren't there. And in fact, what you find out is that's what the odds of that happening is 1 in 8 quadrillion. That's like buying a lottery ticket every weekend and winning. It's a mathematical impossibility for that to have occurred. And that's why I'm telling you that there's places and ways which ballots can be injected into the system, can be stuffed into the ballot box. We have to end our love affair with this no excuse mail-in ballot. If we want to save our state and if we want to save our country, we're going to have to end our relationship with that. That's what I tell the people. It's up to them.
Thank you. And our final closing statement from Justin Heap.
Thank you. So what we've heard here from our current county recorder is a lot of word games, a lot of accusations of lying. And the reason that he's playing these word games is because he doesn't have a record that he can stand on. He was the man in charge, the chief elections officer during the worst run election in Arizona history. And now he is running for re-election and asking you to have him in place for the next 2 election cycles. Every poll shows that voters across the spectrum, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, do not feel confident in the way our elections are run in Arizona. And a big part of that is Stephen Richer and the way he has conducted himself and run his office. It's time to replace someone in that office. I have spent the last 2 years working on Arizona election law in the legislature, and the one person I have never seen at the legislature is Stephen Richer. They're advocating for his office. We will respect the laws, we will restore confidence in the system, and we will make sure that the voters can once again feel confident that their votes are being fairly counted. I hope you'll support me for Maricopa County Recorder.
Thank you. And I'm going to keep you for 1 minute because we have just a few seconds left. Briefly, is there misinformation out there regarding election integrity? Just a very brief answer. Have you seen misinformation out there?
Sure. Anytime you have information, I'm sure some of that information is not true. I'm sure there isn't misinformation in the system, but that's not
Mr. Hiatt, have you seen rapid
Absolutely.
information?
Both ways. There's information that everything is perfect and that this is the most perfect election we've ever had, and everybody looks around and at the evidence that they've experienced and says, no, it wasn't. And then there's people that claim that everything is a total disaster.
And Mr. Richard, very briefly, how much misinformation do you see is out there?
A significant amount. And that's why we're so active in all that we do for transparency. That's why we do the tours. That's why we do the live streams. That's why we do the teletown halls. That's why we answer questions online.
Maybe you could start charging, get the county some money for those tours. They might be very popular. That wraps today's debate with the Republican candidates for Maricopa County Recorder. As a reminder, the Arizona primary election is on July 30, and early voting starts very soon, July 3. All registered voters can participate in the primary, including independents. There are a lot of offices up for election this year, so we'll keep hosting debates through the November general election. Head to azmedia.org to see a list of every local media partner, plus upcoming debates and where you can find them on TV, radio, and digital platforms. You can also see the full debate schedule, learn more about clean elections, and submit questions for future debates by heading to azcleanelections.gov. On behalf of our partners at Clean Elections, the Arizona Media Association, Reister, and Bitfire Studios, thanks for joining us.